So I guess we'll just do a quick checkup on the figs. It's been 2 days since they were transplanted into the 6-inch pots. We're already seeing explosive growth, new leaf growth out the top. I did a foliar feed on some of the other plants here last night, I think. The night before. No, last night. No, night before. So 2 nights ago I did a foliar feed. I didn't foliar feed these directly, but I took the flush out from the last feed and put it on these so they did get some foliar feed effects, and it's pretty evident in our growth rate here. So these are establishing really well, and I got to make spot for them on the farm as quick as I can. But for now, let's take a look at the other propagation. So probably 3 weeks ago, maybe a month ago, I took these cuts. So maybe 3 weeks ago or so, maybe a month ago, I think it's more like 3 weeks, I took all these cuts of elderberry from the back here. There are some gigantic elderberry bushes out back. And I just took a bunch of cuttings off the ends of the plant there and stuck them in this planter soil here to see if I could establish some new plants, new scion cuttings, new clones. And I wasn't expecting a tremendous amount of these to actually catch. I've had varying degrees of success over the years with elderberry. But again, it's that environment dictating gene expression, right? So too many times I've put them out where they had too much sunlight or not enough moisture. They just didn't have the right conditions to get going. But in this case, we're underneath this giant oak tree. And so they're in the shade most of the day, although they get a glimpse of early morning sun and a couple of dapples of sun down throughout the day. So they're getting some sun to help them with photosynthesis, but they're not being exposed to extreme long burning sun cycles, so to speak. And I just was looking at these yesterday, and here we are. We're throwing some new leaves on them. And actually, a good portion of these cuttings are green and showing new shoot growth coming on. So that's really exciting because I want to establish some elderberries at the farm. And yeah, that was easier than I thought it was going to be. And it makes me want to go out and take a whole bunch more elderberry cuttings. If you're not familiar with elderberry, it is a super medicinal plant as far as the berry is concerned. You should not eat them raw. They should be cooked. And you shouldn't, well, most people don't eat the berries. Most people save the juice. Or if they do eat the berries, they use them in a dish with something. They're a pretty strong flavor by themselves and need a little bit of sweetening. But they make an excellent syrup, and they're excellent for building your immune system. And I could go on all day about that, but I'm not gonna. Anyway, so these caught really well, and that's exciting. And we'll track these on out through as they go out onto the farm and grow on. So here's one of the elderberry bushes, and you can see I've kind of kept mowed around this just a couple times a year. Come through and blaze back the underbrush. I got to come through and prune off some vines again, it looks like. But yeah, starting to throw out leaves. These are really beautiful when they're in bloom. They smell fantastic. If you've never had the elderberry flower elixir, that is an excellent treat. Very floral and sweet. And of course, elderberry, you can make like a juice or like a syrup, alcohol kind of thing. I forget what it's called exactly, but that is delicious and an excellent tonic for boosting your immune system throughout the winter. So elderberries are a really interesting one. Elderberry jelly is absolutely delicious also. Alright, just thought I'd do a quick update. Let's see if we can find any shoot runners here quick. Well, usually a little bit later, probably another couple weeks, we'll start to see where little runners like this will be coming up, but they'll be further out from the base of the plant. The elderberry likes to send out like a runner, and then they'll shoot up. Maybe we'll take a look at this bigger elderberry bush over here. Alright, this is a large elderberry which has been competing with the vegetation around it pretty heavily. I came in this fall and just did a little pushback with a tractor to give it a little more advantage over the native stuff here. But this is a good example of where you have like a main elderberry bush cluster, and then it shoots these runners out and they pop up and set new elderberry bushes and that'll keep happening season to season. They also do produce seeds, and they will grow from seed also. But this seems to be the main way that they propagate, at least in an area. So here we are, next day after I adjusted the cutters down a little lower. We got rid of most of the weeds. I still see some weed pressures in here. You can see these starting. So I think I'm going to pick the machine up again and try coming down the row in reverse order now that I know I can clear these plants and not end up raking them backward the other way from what we were doing and risk ripping them out because of the angle. So let's talk a little bit about organic weed control, because this is some stuff that people don't seem to really understand, and I feel like it's super important if you want to control. So let's just talk briefly about conventional farming practices and how conventional farming uses weed controls primarily through chemicals, right? The big famous one is Roundup, by one of our favorite companies, right? Yeah, and so Roundup works by disabling a specific enzyme pathway in plants. And it basically makes the plant's immune system crash and die. It basically actually causes a zinc and manganese deficiency in the plant. And then that crashes the immune system as a result. So you spray that stuff on, it transfers from the leaves to the roots. It basically inhabits the whole plant and locks up trace mineral nutrition. And that's how it works. Roundup, aka glyphosate, locks up trace minerals, and it has a tremendous capacity to chelate trace minerals, especially manganese and zinc. And if you know anything about manganese and zinc and their effect on the reproductive organs and their effect on reproductivity in plants and how it affects nutrient uptake, water uptake, plant health, down the list. Those are two very critical components. So when you go put that stuff out in your field, you start locking up manganese and zinc, you're actually locking up trace mineral nutrition in your soil. And that's not the only two it locks up. It chelates just about every kind of mineral. It's really good at it. So that's how that stuff works, and that's a conventional approach to weed control. But that's not what we do here, and that's not what I've done for a very long time. Now, when I first started learning farming, the farmer that I worked with was using Roundup, and he was told that it was safe, and he told me that it was safe, and I believed him because it was a marketed product, and I thought that our government was trying to protect us, you know, keep us safe from chemicals. But as it turns out, it's not as safe as it was purported to be. And in fact, now when you look around, you see lots of lawsuits happening over it. So they've been discovered. So in organics, if we want to control weeds, we can use many methods. One method that's used, this one right here, is cultivation. Cultivation works great for preventing weeds from coming up. As you can see, it does suppress them. And you can see very clearly the line here between where I've cultivated and where I haven't. And you can see there are a tremendous amount of weed pressures coming on here. And these weeds are small still, but I'll tell you what, in a week they won't be. And even this one that was small, sure didn't take long, did it? So, there's weeding, manual weeding. Most people are familiar with that. There's cultivation, and the one that I really like is mulch, because mulch protects your soil and suppresses weed and holds moisture down and protects microbial communities. And if you use the right materials for mulch, that mulch can actually benefit your crop later as it breaks down and becomes available to plants. So that's an ideal. 23rd. Just going along harvesting these big beefsteak tomatoes. I just took one box out already, just opened a new box. But a tremendous amount of beautiful, large, ripe red fruit coming on here. A few have split a little bit with the excessive rain we've had lately, but overall they're doing pretty good. So I'm going through, I'm going to harvest these all out, and then we're due for another foliar feed. Actually, we're a couple days overdue, so tonight I'm going to give them some more food. Beautiful big beefsteaks. Oh, it smells fantastic in the car already. The car smells being driven out by beefsteak tomatoes. These are crimson beefsteaks for anyone who's interested in this strain or variety. Excellent, large, super tasty, and if you really drive your mineral nutrition correctly, they're not watery. So they make excellent tomato sandwiches and anything else you want to do where you don't want a plate of water with your tomato. Alright, that's it for now. Now, another technique that should be discussed in the scope of this is understanding the life cycle of weeds and weed seeds. Because you see, these weeds didn't just happen spontaneously. These didn't just happen. These seeds were here or got deposited here, and then they germinated and grew. And those seeds come from plants, and each plant typically can put out somewhere between 1,000 and 1,000,000 seeds. So if you let one plant go to seed over here, and that seed drifts off into your land, into your cropland, now you got all these weeds to deal with. So one of the methods we use is controlling the height and the growth season of the plants that we don't want, the weeds, so that they don't reach their reproductive cycle and produce seed. So like here where I've come through and brush hogged earlier this year, back in June, this has been knocked back. But if this grass were allowed to grow and get to its full height, we'd end up with something like this. Here's a spot where it wasn't brush hogged. And right away, what do we see here? Lots of dry seed pods. Let's just have a look. How many seeds are in that? Just that one pod. How many seeds are in that? So, one method that is very effective is maintaining a buffer barrier between the crop area and all the grass seed around you. Now, will you ever get a perfect control of it? No. All it takes is one very high wind and you'll get seeds blowing in. But you can certainly reduce weed pressures dramatically, and that'll have a huge effect. Alright, so that's a pass the other way. There's still a little bit of weed pressure in there. We got most of it knocked out. And I want to get a foliar feed down today because we're due. Yeah, so I gotta go work out the logistics of that. But yet to find a decent tank or have time to put all that together. That seems pretty well tuned, so a little surprised to see these quite so early, but these are black berries. Not black caps, but actual black berries. I doubt these are quite ripe yet, but yeah, a little tart still, but getting some sweetness. So that seems a lot better. We got that middle row cut up cleaner, looser. And there's this one area, this is what I was talking about with layout and AutoCAD and keeping straight, clean rows. See how those two right-hand rows are close together, nice and clean, and you're able to get the machine to cut between the rows clean and not cut into rows or overlap. And then there's one spot where it caught deep on me and went a little sideways, or it was a little soft. I know, it screwed up that row, and it screwed up the row next to it. And now there's a gap between the rows that I can't get to the cutter unless I damage one of the rows to get to it. So this is why we like nice clean lines and nice clean designs. Clean designs, clean lines. The foliar pump. Getting ready to figure out and try to orchestrate another foliar feed here. trying to simplify this for now until we can get better hardware, etc. But I think I'm starting to think somebody's got a little bit of a crush on me or something here. It's this little guy just hanging out under the plastic, sitting right on top of the pump. What's up, dude? Hey, dude. What's up? These guys are so cool. What are you doing, dude? You just hanging out? It's cool, man. It's cool. So after a good amount of aggravation and frustration in this whole foliar feed issue and not really having the equipment set up correctly, not wanting to spend a lot more money to get set up correctly for the future setup, which will be larger, I opted to pick this up at Tractor Supply. I got it for 80 bucks, or like 90 bucks with tax, under 90 bucks. So hopefully this will do the job and we can go get some foliar feeds on and just get it done efficiently. I was losing so much time messing around with the other one. It was just not going to give us any efficiency gains. So I'll let you know how it works. I'm just always astounded every single time. Brand new, brand new. This fitting is cross-threaded on the tank, brand new. What are people doing at work? Seriously. All right, I got it all loaded up with water and nutrients. We're doing C-stem, micro pack, rebound iron, rejuvenate. I think that's it. Oh, and another round of the inoculants just to be 100% sure we've got a catch on it. Spectrum Extra, no, Spectrum PSB or DSB, DSB I think. BioCoat Gold and PZ 1000. Look who's just hanging out grazing. Apparently they think this is a free-for-all. Oh, don't worry. I'll remind you. Where are you going? Is there something I said? What? Well, it's that time. Let's get some foliar feeds on. Should be way more efficient this time, theoretically. I should be able to get this done and get on with a whole bunch of other things instead of just screwing around. Alright, so I took a blaze by here with the Ford before, and I don't know if you're able to see it or not, but I'm going to give you a nice down close up here. Is the turmeric, I always mispronounce that. The turmeric is starting to pop up nicely here. You can see we've had some chewing on it still. You know, there's definitely some leaf chew, but it seems like it's surviving fairly well considering all the rabbits and deer and animal factor here, right? And the tomatoes are also doing well. And the holy basil is just off the hook. And I probably, before I foliar feed this, should harvest a bunch of this because it's fantastic stuff. But I might wait and just take some to some chefs or something. I probably won't get to it tomorrow, and after a foliar feed, I probably shouldn't for a day or so, just so the flavor isn't off. None of these foliar feed nutrients are toxic or chemical or bad for humans. But if you eat like within 24 hours of a foliar feed and you haven't had a rain or a good dew and the plants haven't had a chance to absorb it, sometimes there's a little bit of an off flavor. You can rinse it off, not a big deal. And a chef probably would rinse it off. But I just like to deliver the top, best quality product with no off flavors or anything weird. We don't want to put anybody off to buying our produce or eating something because they have one bad experience their first time. That's very important. And it's just a note here that the deer have been chewing on these tomatoes a little bit. That's going to become less of a problem very soon. I have a stake solution that I'm working on now that won't be so much labor as cutting cedar posts. I don't mind doing that for longer term infrastructure, but until we have things more established and planned out, I don't really want to invest a lot of infrastructure in a place we might not use it. All right, this is working much better. Much better. Right from the car, I can go through and foliar feed everything. Move up a little and just keep going. So that's a much better solution. A worthwhile investment for sure. Saved me a whole lot of time and hassle and energy, and then I can be more effective here on the farm. So after weighing out all my options for staking tomatoes and considering the labor factor in cutting trees, I opted to try some of these 60-inch AC Infinity stakes like I had in the Grow Lab back in the winter on the tomatoes. I mean, I don't know how well these are going to do, honestly. But I thought I would throw some up and see how they do. And then if they work, I'll budget them as we go as best I can. I honestly thought these were going to be a little more sturdy than this, but I had a few bend on me already putting them in. And I actually had to go along with a hammer, a lump hammer, and a metal pin. This guy here, because this soil, this clay soil is so hard still, we haven't opened it up and flocculated it yet, or really penetrated it with biology or aggregate or any of that. So I use this to drive down about a foot to give us a nice deep set, because I don't want these falling over once they get a fruit load on them. And then a couple of them I tried to shove in. That's the one that bent over there, and then this one actually snapped on me. Just shoving it down in vertical, and it, I have a little friction resistance. I think they'll be better once they're twined together, because we'll have that integrated network structure that helps really sturdy things up. But they might still need me to go back between them and throw in something heavier duty, spacers, and I'm still going to keep considering other options for now. But hey, at least it's a start, and there's something to tie up to, so that's good. So I'm going along here weeding this holy basil, and I come across this plant. I think that is a holy basil wood. I don't know what the deal is with it. I don't know if that's a genetic variation or if there's an environmental factor here. But very strange. The rest of these are large, robust, dark green, setting flowers and seeds at phenomenal rates, just cranking. There's this one that's kind of purplish, reddish. It's almost like it's got a phosphorus deficiency. But, here we are, right next to these other plants. And those are June bugs you're seeing on there, by the way. They don't really do too much chewing on them. They do a lot of bugging the crap out of me out here at night. They love the light. Anyway, I just thought I'd point out that interesting little variation there. Little genetic anomaly. So one technique I want to talk about in terms of organic weed management. This is one I've used in the past, especially when weeds have gotten way out of hand on me. When your weeds grow up as tall as your crop or taller, these giant weeds, if you catch them before they go to seed, this works. I would not do this with weeds that are going to seed, although you're probably going to spread those seeds everywhere anyway, and maybe it doesn't matter at that point anyway. But you'd try not to spread more of the weed seed into your beds. Although there's ways to get them to germinate out and get rid of them, and there's ways to cull them and that kind of stuff. And we can talk about that. But for now, in the past, when I've had weeds get too far out of hand, and I do it on a small scale like this too, but this won't turn out to be much once they dry out. But you pick your weeds out. You make sure the roots are shaken free of dirt. And by the way, when you weed, pull the weed. Don't nip the weed off. Do we gotta go over this again? Maybe we should, because I just saw somebody recently nipping the tops of weeds off in a garden. And I thought, oh man, are they creating a problem for themselves later? Remember that cytokine auxin balance. You cut the top, you stimulate root growth, and that root growth comes back with more shoot growth. And that's exactly what we've done here to make these holy basil bush up and become the big, beautiful, bushy plant that they are. I nipped the top of these, and they branched out as a result of it all over the place. So we saw them stall after the transplant, and I nipped them. Well, that stall, although it might not seem evident, is that plant doing its root thing, growing roots instead of shoots. Bugs are horrible. But, man, bugs are distracting. But remember, the roots are what supports the plant, right? So when the roots grow out more and they get a hold, it's going to bounce back the other way. That cytokine auxin balance, where auxins promote tip growth and cytokines promote root growth. Well, if you cut all the tips out, you've taken all the auxins out, you're going to have a lot of cytokines because you have lots of root mass and very little, upper mass with our hormones. So you've tipped it. So it's going to try to balance that back out. So when you nip the tops of weeds, you're enhancing what that plant is going to do later on, and you're making a bigger problem for yourself unless you're going to stay on top of it. And at that point, you have a living mulch. At that point, you should be cover cropping instead of fighting weeds. Put in a crop that enhances and benefits your soil better. Even better, put in multiple species of that. And hey, guess what? Now all of a sudden you've planted a crop that's dominated that soil, and those weeds can't compete, and they get shaded out and crowded out, and they don't have a chance. So there's lots of ways to do this, and we'll talk about that cover cropping thing. That's a very powerful tool in this whole scheme of organic weed management and weed control. But I just wanted to point out that this is a great one, especially if your weeds have gotten a little bit out of hand. Yank them out, make sure the root is shaken off, lay them out like that, like a mat, and now you're basically using the weeds as mulch. As they break down, they'll provide nutrients to your plants. Now the weeds that were such a liability, basically, have now become an asset to your crop. I guess if we're going to talk about weeding and pulling weeds and how to do that, I should actually try and give you a demonstration. So this is actually a bush. Like, this is from where the cutter went through here, right? The bed former. I came through with a heavy machine, just cut grass and overgrown, this kind of stuff. This is all the native species that are here. I'm calling them weeds now because it's not what I want to grow, but I don't even call all these weeds. I mean, this is an awesome variation of plants all through here, right? Anyway, we cut that down, and the cutter came through, and now we're calling this a weed because we don't want it to grow here. And I haven't got mulch down like a good boy. So the trick is, grab it right by the base of the root as best you can, and pull slowly and gently. Don't jerk, but pull slowly and gently, and give it a chance to come out. And you can see how much actually comes out of there. Now it's an extreme example because there's like native tree species and stuff growing in here, but you get the idea. The same thing applies with lamb's quarter on a small scale. Very easy to pull. Here's a bigger one that got broken off or chewed off. It's like the deer chewed off because of the nutrients probably. So slow and gentle. Let it come out, right? Let it kind of pull free from the soil. Now the reality is, if you wanted to, you could take that root mass of that weed or plant and plug it into some good soil and give it some care and love. It would probably keep right on growing. It wouldn't even really miss a beat, basically. So that's the other part of it. That's the other part of why we take it out, we make sure it's shaken clean, and we set it so the root is up in the air in the sun, and the root will be exposed and die. Remember when I showed you the other day, actually I'll try and pull a clip out. The other day I showed you the potato plants that had pulled out with the hiller, and I went and stuck them back in as quickly as I could so they weren't exposed to sunlight. Remember, that sunlight can do so much damage to root systems. Those are supposed to be in moist, dark soil with microbial communities surrounding them and nutrients and all kinds of things going on. But sunlight and high intensity ultraviolet light and high intensity heat are not something that they want to be seeing. So yeah, only a couple, not too bad. Where'd that come out of? Here, I guess. Yeah, here. So that's a shame that we wiped out a plant there. And actually, I think these will catch again. They'll be okay, because we're catching them before the roots can be exposed to the sun too long and really die back. And we're towards evening here, so it's going to cool off shortly. Kill them. That's what we do. And if we want to protect them, we do the opposite thing. So I hope all that makes sense to you. I hope that's helpful to somebody. And I hope I haven't babbled on too long about weeding along here. And oh my, what do I find popping up? One of those sweet potatoes I planted a while back. That's a nice find. Almost forgot about them. So there are some surviving. Okay, so another thing we need to talk about in weed management is mowing management, but more specifically, mowing timing management, but more specifically, mowing timing management based on height of plant or maturity of plant. Here's a good example here. Where I haven't mowed through and we have plants going to full maturity, we have flowers getting ready to set on these goldenrod here. These are goldenrod. These will throw out bright yellow flowers in, I don't know, maybe another month. Things seem to be firing early this year, so maybe a couple weeks. That looks pretty well advanced. Pretty sure that's a goldenrod also. So tall stuff like that in here, right? A lot of these going toward maturity. We have flowers in here. We have well-developed plants in here. We even have grapevines climbing up on top of this canopy and like trying to establish their light access and dominance. And then as we come back over here where I mowed, where I brush hogged, but where I haven't cut soil yet, there's a whole nother level of plants here. So here's the trick. If you cut plants too short, like we talked about before, the cytokine-auxin balance, you really stall that plant back for a long time. The other thing that you get, if you don't let that plant grow in height, remember, as above, so below. The height of the plant is going to some degree, especially varying with species, but in general, the height of the plant is going to determine how deep that root goes, how deep that tap root goes into the soil. So, if you keep plants short, those plants only affect the soil so far down. But if you let those plants grow nice and tall, and then you mow them back, now you've affected soil that much deeper. That's a lot in the ground. And you're building that much more soil in doing that way. And you're allowing photosynthesis to reach a much higher peak before you chop it off and stop the photosynthetic process. And let's never, ever, ever forget, please don't forget this. Photosynthesis drives the entire process. So we need to manage, really, photosynthesis as it relates to soil through plants as a medium. That's really how we should be looking at this. And that itself is probably a very blunt explanation. And I'll probably look back at this and say, wow, I could have said that better in the future. But for now, that's a good way to look at it. And I'm sorry, but I'm very passionate about this. So now that we know that, that really ties into what happens when we cut soil and we leave it bare. So now it's not photosynthesizing. Oh, and now there's another process involved with this. You know what that process is? Oxidation. Because now it's being exposed to oxygen and it has nothing to protect it. Remember, that's an armor layer right there. And you can see the difference here, can't you? You can see that's a layer of armor. Underneath there, It's green, it's moist. I mean, if we dig this soil up under here, you'll see how much moister this is under here than over here, right? So that's the trick. So if you can let them grow taller before you mow them under, you can have tremendous benefits on soil. And then if you go a step further and you have like a cover crop, you grow that cover crop with some foliar feeds. Those foliar feeds can dramatically accelerate photosynthetic action. And in doing so, can dramatically accelerate the soil building process, the speed at which those plants grow, and the speed at which you can turn all that over. So these are all things to consider. And what they become for us in having this knowledge, that those become excellent tools in our toolbox for soil and weed management and for plant management. And so, as I talked about earlier about controlling seeds, over here, these are going to be going to seed, right? But over here, these since they were mowed back, are behind a ways, but they are headed that direction. They're trying to get through their vegetative cycle. They're starting to try to turn toward a flowering cycle. So this would be the time, if you want to maximize the use of a native weed that you don't want to spread more seed of, you come through and mow it before it goes to seed. Now you've let it do photosynthesis, you've let it hold the native soil, you've let it build soil, you've let it build carbon for you, you've let it be a tool, and yet it doesn't end up being a just in mowing, I gave it an advantage to take the space back, and you can see it's actually filling in quite thickly and quite nicely, and it's continuing to spread through here. And you'll notice that I've actually let it go to full into flower and produce seed here on the stalk, so that